Welcome back to Stooge Stream. I'm your host, the Stooge, and this is another episode of Is It Worth Playing? But in this case, it's Is It Still Worth Playing? And we're looking at an Xbox One current exclusive, Rise of the Tomb Raider. Now you might be wondering, why so late? Well, maybe I'm not late. Maybe I'm really early. Because the timed exclusivity of this game is running out, meaning that a PS4 port and possibly even an export is inevitable at this point and on its way. That means this game's coming to a whole other set of users that haven't had the experience of playing it yet. So let's pull it apart, put it back together, and see, is it still worth playing? If you hadn't played the original game in the series, the reboot of Tomb Raider, you may not know what this is about. Now, cast your mind back a few years when we heard that there was going to be another reboot of the Tomb Raider franchise, and all of us collectively groaned and sighed at the same time. If you were anything like me, you were thinking, why won't they just let this franchise die? Lara Croft was very much a product of the 90s. And to an extent, that's kind of where she should have stayed. Curse of Darkness and all the later games in the Tomb Raider series just never really seemed to capture the same feeling and essence that was the character originally that set her apart from so many other video game characters and protagonists. Well, when Crystal Dynamics rebooted the series, they very much captured that and modernized it at the same time. Though the first game seemed to be almost borderline torture porn on how much damage can this poor girl take, it still told a really great story of a gritty, realistic female protagonist that stood up for the right thing and scratched and clawed her way back from near death to save the day for all of us. Not only that, but the mechanics of this open world Tomb Raider game that we were promised worked really, really well. The hunting, the bow and arrows, the finding all the hidden items and things all around were great. The only thing that was missing was the game was called Tomb Raider, and there were no tombs to be found. Jump forward a couple of years and Microsoft have paid Crystal Dynamics for an exclusive for their console, and that's Rise of the Tomb Raider, the follow-up to that initial great game. Does it live up to its predecessor? I'd say it definitely does. Now, let's start visually. Visually, this game is a step up from its previous incarnation. Clearly being on more powerful hardware, they were able to push the in-game engine to make it look really nice. In fact, I'd say that the in-game engine actually looks better than the cutscenes, which seem to drop down in fidelity. The in-game engine has a lot of really good qualities about it visually. It does leave a little bit of a shine on things occasionally, but that's more than forgivable. When you're out in the snow, the colors, the textures, the feeling makes it feel like you're trudging through snow. When you're in the depths of a cave, it's dark and dank and you hear those weird noises and it feels claustrophobic. When you're out in the jungle, it feels lush and open, like you can jump around, and the greens and the colors are all great, and the noises of animals in the background, and everything visually works really well. Again though, except for the cutscenes, which at times can feel really jarring. Jumping from the engine to the cut video sequences, man, sometimes they drop in quality. They really look bad at points. So I hope in the inevitable ports to PS4 and possibly NX, that maybe gets looked at and upscaled a little bit and fixed up, or maybe those sequences are redone in-game engine, because the in-game engine looks really good. Now, let's have a chat about the audio. The voice acting in the game is actually really decent. There are points, of course, when you come across random NPCs that the voice acting doesn't sound amazing and feels a little bit forced. But, I mean, when you have hundreds of NPCs in the game, one or two here and there, not really a big deal. 99.999% of the time, the voice acting is on point. The character interactions are really good. The actual dialogue is well written and well comprehended by the actors and well delivered. So it really does pull you into the world. It does tell a great story and follows up the first Tomb Raider reboot with where Lara is now and what's happening in her life and world. Following on from that, the random noises. So things like when you're walking through the jungle and you can hear birds in the background, or random things moving in the bushes and things. It really draws you in. It's really well done. When you're in the snow and you hear the wind whipping and so forth, they put a lot of effort into the sound design of this game. The music design is exactly the same. It fits the sequences perfectly. When you're in a sequence that requires more brooding music, you get that. When you're in a sequence that doesn't require any music at all, there isn't any. The developers have spent a lot of time making sure that the world feels as good as it looks. On to mechanics. If you played the first reboot of Tomb Raider, you'd know things are a little bit different this time around. You have a crafting system, you have a weapon upgrade system. It's an open world game where you can basically run around and just do random things. You don't have to follow the quest lines. There's all sorts of stuff going on in the game itself, and this one is no different. And mechanically, the character can do a whole lot of different things, like basically take everything you can do in Uncharted, you can do it in this game. You can swing on hook ropes, and you can climb up stuff and jump from ledges to ledges and all of that. The animation sequences have all been slightly smoothed out, feel a lot better, move a lot better. Not to say that in the first game they were terrible, because they weren't. They were really good. It just feels like it's been refined. The actual delay between what you press and what happens on screen feels a lot closer to where it should be. The actual animations of Lara, like going through cracks and crevices and all of that type of thing, feels really nice and looks really good. The running mechanics work really well. The jumping, the swinging, everything's pretty much on point. You know when you die, it's not the game's fault, it's your fault, because you didn't know where you were going, or you mistimed a hook grab or something. It's never the game's fault, it's mostly your fault. So the design of the game works really well with the implemented mechanics and the actual physics engine of the game itself. I really enjoy running around in this world and discovering the hidden tombs and puzzles and things like that. Trying to find like little treasures and stuff, and crafting items and finding stuff to craft items with. Whereas in other games, I kind of just skip straight past it. This game, it feels good. The combat feels good as well. You've got an automatic hiding system, so if you go behind cover, she'll automatically cover. The weapons feel quite nice and weighty. The bow and arrow is just awesome. Of course, anytime you can use a bow and arrow in a game is just awesome. Everything feels really nice. She moves quite fluidly. The AI in the game is uber smart. They will flank you, they will get around you, they will figure out how to flush you from cover, and they will absolutely nail you. It may take a go or two in some of the action sequences just to figure out how to get through it, or figure out a way to bottleneck the enemy so they can't flank you. That makes it fun. I like that. I like the fact that you have to think a little bit. You can't just rush in there. It's quite clever. Moving on to the gameplay, as we've just discussed, the enemy's quite smart. They will flank you. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot to do in this game as well. The storyline will take you through numerous hours just to get through, but there's hidden tombs and caves and hidden loot and stuff to explore everywhere and find, and this world is huge and feels really fleshed out. There's a lot of fun to kind of jump around and find the stuff in as well, which will make you want to do it. Whereas in other titles, you're like, oh, this is just tedious. I don't want to do this. Whereas in this, you walk past the hidden tomb, you're like, oh, how do I open this one? Okay, explosive arrows blow up the front. What's in here? And off you go and find new weapon parts and stuff. And you do get rewarded for exploring these things. So it is worth your time doing it too. It's not one of those things that you get to the end and go, well, that took me 20 minutes and that was a complete waste of time. I got nothing out of that. No, you'll get a new weapon part or something. There will be something worth your time in that tomb, which is really cool. There's a lot to do as far as crafting as well. Crafting new items, weapons, crafting ammo, crafting all sorts of stuff. So you're going to need to pick stuff up. You're going to need to skin animals. You're going to need to do all sorts of things in this game if you want to get the most out of it. Now, in saying that, you don't have to do that. You don't have to go after all the hidden dungeons. You don't have to craft, and you can still get through the game. If you just want to play the story, do the puzzles, jump around, kill people, that's awesome. You don't have to do this stuff, but it's there if you want to. Speaking of puzzles, the first few are really easy. You will just be like, well, you just press that and do that. Really? That's it? Then you'll start getting up to some that are real mind benders and quite well designed things that you're like, oh, this sucks. Why can't I figure it out? Walk away from the game, come back an hour later, sit down and go, oh, that's how you do it. Those type of puzzles. Really well designed puzzles and platforming sections and action sequences. Allow me to apologize, I've got a touch of the flu at the moment. All in all though, this is definitely a game that's still worth playing, and when it gets ported over to the PS4, if you haven't had the chance to experience it yet because you don't have an Xbox One, definitely worth picking up. I'm sure there'll be a definitive edition with all sorts of extras and stuff on there. If it comes to the NX, it's definitely going to be worth picking up on the NX if you haven't had an Xbox One and haven't experienced it. This is a great game, and I'm really excited for the fact that the timed exclusivity is running out and more people are going to get to enjoy this. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, make sure you subscribe. Helps us out a lot here on the channel. We're also giving away an Atari 2600 before the end of October 2016. So depending on when you're listening to this, jump on the channel, make sure you check the video about the giveaway and get yourself entered into that. Thanks again. I've been your host, The Stooge, and we'll be back with more Is It Worth Playing soon.